Good afternoon, Father Jay Donahue here, exploring Catholicism in ways that just get better and better. There's a passage in Scripture that I find quite inspirational, and it's a great way to introduce our show today. It's from Hebrews 12:1, and it says, "Therefore, since we are all surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that it so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us." Today, we're going to be talking to somebody who throws things out professionally, a baseball pitcher, my cousin, Dave Phelps. And before we get into the program today, last week, we had just a tremendous time talking about the corporal works of mercy and the tremendous outreach that's going on in our great grouping of 4 parishes here in the Pittsburgh area. And it's just inspirational. We had somebody even just the other day from the Ultimate Pastry Shop, Tina and Bill Eckert, who donated over $600 worth of their greatest sweets, cookies and pies. And I even had a cherry pie. It was really good. But after all we did this past week, we had a little fundraiser. We were going to say we're going to do a matching gift. And after the program ended, we had about $400 or $500 raised so far. And throughout the whole entire week, as we've been building up for today's program, and the things officially ended just a couple minutes ago, we raised over $15,000 for those who have lost their jobs and are looking for ways to make it by. So it's a great way for us to continue to help fund and feed our food bank. So if that gets doubled, the official number would be $31,856, thanks to you and for all the support that has come through the interview that I got to do with Cindy DeShane in the Beaver Valley. So our great grouping continues to persevere and find the silver lining in this very challenging Corona time. So anyway, moving from the beautiful gift of our charity, we come today to the great vocation that many people have in terms of their professional careers having an impact on our world. And for me, one of these things is athletics. I've always had this childhood dream of being able to interview some professional athlete and go behind the scenes and figure out what life is like for somebody who's a professional athlete. I grew up in Pittsburgh and loved going to the baseball games, and we won a World Series in 1979 and watching Kent DeColvey, who was like this kind of underhand type of pitcher, sidearm pitcher, and the Candyman, John Candelaria, and being able to watch him throw a no-hitter. I always wondered, from a perspective of a pitcher's mound, what does life look like? Well, today this dream comes true with my cousin, Dave Phelps, who I can't wait to have on the program with us and to be able to experience a little bit what life is like from the pitcher's mound. And so, Dave, welcome to the program. How are you doing today?
Doing well. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I mean, it's great to be on here and to have a chance to share some good news in these times. I think it's with all the Zoom calls and everything we've had these past 2 months, being able to see your face as much as I've been able to, whether it was with Renew the I Do or this, it's been a blessing for sure.
Yeah, it's been a real grace to team up with Dave. Ever since he joined my team and our family, him and his wife have just done tremendous things with our married couples and with those who are getting prepared. So Dave and Maria have just done great stuff with our Renew the I Do program and giving talks and things. But let's just start a little bit with a little of your background, Dave. You were drafted out of Notre Dame. You went to the Yankees in 2008. You were named the minor league pitcher of the year in 2010. And for 3 years, pitched with the Yankees. And now currently you're with the Milwaukee Brewers. And I just counted them. I went through all of his pitches. He actually pitched. He's thrown 5,000 pitches. Actually, it's a stat. I didn't actually count them all. But anyway, he tends to strike out about 25% of the batters, especially with a 4-seam pitch. We'll get into that a little bit later. But the best part, in my opinion, of what Dave Phelps has done in his career is not actually pitching, but the way in which he was able to make the great choice of the hand of marriage to my dear cousin, Maria Phelps. Dave, what was it? What are some of the memories that you have of meeting Maria at Notre Dame? What were some of the things that struck you about that courtship time, or maybe thinking back to college and first meeting her?
Yeah, so everyone wants it to be love at first sight, and sparks fly and whatnot. So we were paired up for an assignment based on our last names. Mine being Phelps, hers was Petnich at the time, and so we were paired together. and I was not looking forward to it. I did well with my academics at Notre Dame, but it's went in and we were supposed to have done a reading. I hadn't done it. And so they called us down. You just raise your hand, Phelps Petnich. This is where you're going to be paired up. And I was just like, oh, I'm going to be paired up with a student. Like we as athletes typically viewed ourselves a little differently. So
there's no class warfare going on here at all. Like athletes breathe a higher air and everybody else is just a student. That never would happen, right? At Notre Dame?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
But when she raised her hand, I looked over and I'm just like, well, this could definitely work. Obviously I was attracted to her. And so we get there, and for anyone watching, if the worst pickup line ever is probably, oh, I didn't do the reading, I hope you did. And so my wife, Maria, who is, Dean's List all 4 years at Notre Dame, obviously it was not sparks flying for her. But we got through the assignment, and I would ask her out about once a month for that entire year. And she would and it would be, like, do you want to go grab a bite to eat? Do you want to go to dinner? Like, do you just want to hang out? I just wanted to, there was something about her that something within my heart realized that I needed to know this person. And she would just flat out say no. It wasn't like, oh, I've got this to do, I've got that to do. It was just a flat out no. And then a full year later, one of her friends was finally like, oh, I've heard he's a good guy. I'm friends with a couple of the baseball players. Like, you should just give him a chance. And so we went on a date. And
was this sophomore year, junior year? What year of college?
This was my junior year, her sophomore year. So we met sophomore year, her freshman year. And at the time when we met, I was actually in the middle of having an incredible baseball season. She was completely oblivious to that. And the following year, when she finally gave me a chance, we started dating, and we went on a couple dates, and then it was getting to be the end of the semester for her, the beginning of May, and she flat out was just like, all right, so what are we? Like, I was 21 years old. I was unaware that I had to say the words like, will you be my girlfriend? We were essentially having to define the relationship at that point, because she was about to go home for the summer. This was 2008, when I was hoping to get drafted at the end of my season. And so she went home. We defined the relationship. We were boyfriend and girlfriend at that point. And a month later, the beginning of June, the draft rolled around, and I was in St. Louis, where I'm from, waiting to hear if I was going to get drafted or not. I had plans that if I wasn't drafted in the first day, which I believe was 8 rounds, I was going to start driving up to Cape Cod, where I was going to play summer baseball and try and improve whatever my draft status was. And on my way to driving, I was going to stop in Pittsburgh, because it was about halfway. I was going to stay with Maria and her family, which I had an understanding of the size of her family as far as her siblings. About halfway to Pittsburgh, my dad called me and he said, hey, should I buy a Yankees hat? And I wasn't following the draft at that point.
Wait a second. You got drafted and you weren't following the draft?
This was before the iPhone had just come out. I think I had a Motorola Razr at the time. It wasn't something that I was able to there were no podcasts to live stream the draft. So I realized that if I was going to get drafted, I was probably going to have to pitch in summer for a little bit to improve whatever the offer the Yankees were going to make was going to be. So I was just committed to going to the Cape. And my dad says, hey, should I buy a Yankees hat? I was like, why? What happened is they just drafted you in the 14th round. I was like, oh, cool.
Is that, just to take a pause from your conversation about you and Maria, do you think that's kind of providential that your biggest fans were your mom and your dad got to break you that news?
It really was. I think it's, we had, coming out of high school, my senior year of high school was my brother's junior year of college. And he was a really highly touted pitcher as well. And so we had a big party at our house for the draft that year, thinking that we might both potentially get picked. He got picked and I didn't. And so we were extremely excited for him. At that point, I had, a fantastic opportunity to go to Notre Dame. But yeah, I mean, up to that point, like those three people in my life were like the biggest fans and just my biggest support. I remember, my parents working from sun up to sundown just so that my brother and I could have the opportunities that we could have. And it's, people often ask like, where did your work ethic, or, you work hard, like, how did you learn that? It's not something that I had to learn. Like I witnessed it on a daily basis from my parents, and just the amount of love and like just dedication they put in, not only to what they did, but also into my brother and I, was just something that I can never thank them enough for. But yeah, with my dad being the one that got to break me the news in 2008, it's definitely like it came full circle then in 2012 when I was able to call them and break the news of me making the major league roster. But
because they rarely missed a game of yours, right? When you were in St. Louis and things, they would always be there for you, taking you to games and encouraging you when you were little, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it was more so mom growing up. Dad coached Mike, my brother, when we were younger, and so mom brought me to a lot of my games. But as we started to get older, when I started playing like more travel baseball, they didn't miss a tournament. They didn't miss a game. When I was at Notre Dame, like if I was pitching on Friday night, they would make the 6-hour drive to be there for the first pitch. And like they didn't miss games. And that was just,
you, like Michael Jordan, it's incredible to see the effect that your parents have on your performance. And one of the things that came out in the Michael Jordan documentary was the effect of his mom and dad. And obviously it's a blessing that your parents are still alive, but the inspiration of like when he lost his dad and always having his mom by his side. What does that mean to have your parents supporting you, cheering you on, whether you're in Little League or you're in the major leagues?
I think it was something that I didn't necessarily realize when I was younger, but when I started my own family and I was still playing, and knowing, especially like coming home when I have a bad game, that Maria and my children, like they don't view me any differently because I had a bad game. Like I'm dad, like I'm still, like they still love me with all their heart. Like, and when you're 10, 11, 15, 16 years old, you don't realize that in your parents. But as you get older, like I would have, whether I played good or I played poorly, I'd come home and my mom was loving, my dad was supportive. It was, they were the ones lifting me up when I needed it. And that exactly what you're saying is that, I wasn't a baseball player. I was their son first and foremost, who just so happened to be good at baseball. And so that was, when I was a teenager, obviously I didn't understand it and I didn't get it. But when they dropped me off at school and my dad gave me a hug and started to cry for the first time like in my life, it really set in that like this is, they were my biggest fans and they were excited for me, and that was,
I've been able to go to a couple of your games and sit with them, and I get nervous because here's my cousin pitching, and I was blessed to watch your first victory after we baptized your baby as you're pitching for the Yankees against the Baltimore Orioles. But being with your parents just brings that whole, they saw you throw your first pitch. They saw you with different changes of uniform. Your family, your parents and your brother really set you up to be able to do what you're doing now,
No,
go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, and then that also like extends to Maria and my children, and not just,
right.
It started with my parents and my brother, but like you think about like all, and I think that's what I definitely, when I first got called up to the big leagues, but also, in times where I pitch in Pittsburgh or times where I pitch in St. Louis, I do get emotional because it's not just my parents and my brother and Maria and my kids. Like, there are so many people that have sacrificed so much for me to be able to do what I do for a living. And it's those people who lifted me up at different points in my life, whether it be my family, my friends, my coaches, aunts and uncles. That's what, when people get emotional about their career, it's not about like, oh, well, I struck this guy out or I got hit really hard in this day. It's, what it took. Like, it is so statistically improbable for me to be doing what I'm doing, just being one person. But when you think about all the effort and all the love that was poured into me so that I was able to get to this point, like, you realize like why it happened and how it happened. And obviously there's a much larger factor in that, and that's God's blessing in my daily life. But, just being able to surround myself with those people and just the people that have been put in my life has been amazing.
So how did you see God leading you, or if you look back now that God's led you to date Maria and finally come to propose marriage to her? So you got drafted by the Yankees. You're driving out to Pittsburgh. Was this the first time you ever met her family? Because let's just say that our family is kind of intimidating. We only have on one side 13 kids from my grandparents, now 84 grandchildren. We're almost 200 great-grandchildren. So did you come to some small family gathering as a first type of experience of us?
So I knew Maria's older sister, Laura, because she was in my class at Notre Dame. I met her through Maria. But driving up and knowing that I was staying in Pittsburgh, it was at that time that I started, the negotiations with the Yankees about my signing bonus and if I was going to sign or if I was going to stay the night and drive up to Cape Cod the following day. And that first night, Maria and I were out. She was going to show me around Mount Washington. We were doing the incline. And I remember being in a parking garage, and the Yankee scout who drafted me called me, and he was like, "This is our final offer. It's kind of, take it or leave it." It was a good offer, and it was, kind of what we were going for. And it was at that point that we made the decision that I was going to, sign with the Yankees. And so I had about a week before I needed to report to camp. And so we kind of were flying by the seat of our pants the following day because your brother was getting married in Pittsburgh, and Maria, who was invited to the wedding, we were, your Aunt Sue, my mother-in-law, was like, "No, you can come to the wedding." Like, I'm thinking, okay, we'll sit in the back row. No one will notice me, whatever. But at this time, I don't have a suit. I don't have a tie. All I have is a pair of khakis. So I think I wore one of your cousin's jackets, your uncle's tie. It's just a whole hodgepodge of clothing. And we go to the mass. And no, I'm not sitting in the back row. I'm sitting in the second row right behind your grandmother.
Oh, boy.
So she was one of the first people in the family that I actually met. And so get through the mass, the wedding, and Maria wasn't going to go to the reception. We were actually going to go to the Cheesecake Factory to grab dinner. And mind you, this is all within like a month of us like defining our relationship that we were going to be like boyfriend and girlfriend. So I met Maria's 8 siblings that day.
Wait, how many siblings does Maria have?
Maria is one of 9.
How many boys and girls in the family? Do you know?
There are 6 girls, 3 boys.
And you'd never met them before. This was your first exposure to the whole family besides Laura.
So I get to the house, and I met everyone, and that was when we went out. And the following day, we were going to the Cheesecake Factory for dinner, and we get a call from your Aunt Sue, Maria's mom, and she says, "Hey, you guys need to get here right now." Ann set a place for Dave at the reception, and we're just like, "Oh my gosh!" Like this is happening. And I knew, and it was at this point that Maria started to like prepare me to meet her family. And it wasn't just her family, because the family that was also getting married is not a small family either. So I think I met, of the 84 you said, or
Yeah.
84 cousins. I'm pretty sure I met about 75 of them that night. And I'm going around, and then the story starts to spread that I got drafted by the Yankees. And so one of my most terrifying moments of my life was about halfway through the reception when Maria's mom grabs my arm and drags me onto the dance floor, who I've only met the day before. But it was at that point that it wasn't just a normal relationship for us. It was something that there was more to it. And I think going back to when we first met, realizing there was a part of my heart that realized that it needed to get to know Maria. We talk about soulmates. We talk about a heart's desire to be connected to another heart. And I think that was definitely God working between Maria and myself, just realizing that this was the person who I was meant to marry. And it was funny because we talked about it as the year went by, and Maria's mom even said that from the moment that she met me, she was like, this is the person that Maria's going to marry. And I think, through our courtship that year, we only saw each other once that summer. I was in Staten Island playing, and I went back to Notre Dame that fall. And then I was a student, not an athlete at that point. And I was back. I was supposed to take classes, but I ended up not being able to. And we were actually able to just, really focus on us and really get to know each other on a much deeper level. And going back to that summer where we only saw each other once when we first started dating, it really forced us to have a lot of conversations about really deep things. At this point, I wasn't a practicing Catholic. I was raised in St. Louis all the way. I went to CCD every Wednesday night through elementary and middle school. And I did not enjoy it one bit. It was just something that we were forced to do on a Wednesday night. Sundays were for baseball, basketball, soccer practice. It just wasn't a big part of our family life. And all through that, I did have a relationship with Christ. I'd pray every night. I remember at my confirmation retreat, listening to some of the speakers that we had, and there were certain things that really stuck with me. One of them was, saving myself for marriage, and that was just, something that really stuck with me, and it was just something that made a lot of sense. And just as soon as I finished my confirmation, it was just, I didn't really think about my faith. Through high school, I didn't go to church. I had friends that were part of Bible studies of youth groups, and it was just something that I wasn't interested in. And I was blessed to go to Notre Dame. It's an amazing Catholic community, and we had mass for every Sunday night in our dorm. And it was just, I'd rather play video games or whatever it may be, but being able to look back and realize God's working in our life. My roommate, who was our shortstop, his dad was an Assembly of God pastor in Texas, and he would ask me every Sunday if I wanted to go to church. He had found a really nice church in South Bend, and I was like, no, man, I'd rather sleep, or I'm going to go to the dining hall, whatever it is. I'd just say no. And eventually he stopped asking, but then fast forward to our junior year, it was one of the first weekends of the fall, and he asked us, hey, do you want to go to church? And for whatever reason, I was like, you know what? Sure. And thinking to myself, I'll go once, he'll stop asking me. And so I went, and the first thing I realized when I walked in was, the music, the worship that was going on was just really just overwhelmed me, and just this is something, wow, this is amazing. This is not what I remember, church being like from when I was really young. It was just something that, really struck my heart. And I remember sitting there and thinking okay, this is much better than I expected. So I went back the following Sunday, and little by little started to listen more and more and relate to what the pastor was saying. It was around that time that we started to get really involved with the Fellowship of Christian Athletes at Notre Dame, and really started to just think about what my faith meant in my life. And I think it was really important at that time because coming off of my sophomore year, I'd had an incredible season and actually went to Cape Cod and pitched. And there was just this feeling that when the season was over and had a really good year, but there was just like, there's got to be more. I just wasn't fulfilled with what I had done on the baseball field. And so fast forward to junior year when getting very much in touch with my faith and owning it, and went out that season. It was around that time, when the season starting, that Maria and I started our courtship. And I didn't have a great year. And it was just, I was frustrated going into the draft. I was fortunate enough to be drafted and signed. But that summer, we really started to have conversations about our faith and about like what was important to us. And it was through those conversations that I came back to the Catholic faith. It was that following fall at Notre Dame. I went to confession for the first time in 15 years. I realized.
Don't worry, I won't ask you about your first confession in 15 years.
Oh, we don't have enough time. But no, it was realizing that there were certain truths that I still held firm to. And one of them was the Eucharist. And, with the conversations with Maria through that summer just made me realize that I identified as a Christian. Like that was what, and then people would ask me, well, what's important? I said, well, having a relationship with Jesus Christ is, and being on that journey. But it was through those conversations that I realized that there was more to that. And it was that fall that I came back to the Catholic faith. And, it's that faith that has really just grounded me and been, my rock through my career, because looking back, that's what was missing my sophomore year. It was, as much as I was fulfilled in the baseball field, I had a big hole in my heart that was God-sized. And it wasn't until I, really accepted him back into my life that I really started to feel that fulfillment. And going through my career, going forward after that, it's, what's really helped keep me balanced. And, I often use the phrase, I'm not defined by, the back of my baseball card. And that's why, because, God will always be, my number one. Baseball can't be number one. And I've said that many times. And there have been times where, I've been tested in that. And it's definitely been, my faith has been the rock that, not only from a family perspective, but also from a career perspective, that's really kept everything moving in the right direction.
Yeah. And what's interesting about what you're saying there is how your faith and meeting Maria kind of all came together, and your career. So it's like there's this culminating moment where you get drafted by the Yankees, you're about to meet her family, and it all kind of comes in at once. It's incredible how that all works together like that. Now, before we move on to some of your pitching career, brag on your kids, because how many kids do you have? Because I think one of the great fruits of what's going on in your life is that you and Maria were able to challenge each other in the faith and be open to having children. And so you got 4 kids, so you got one at each point of the diamond to pitch to now. But brag on your kids a little bit. What's it like being Daddy Dave?
Oh, man, I have 4 amazing children. Adeline, who's 8, Eloise, who is 6, Jackson, who's 5, and Genevieve, who is 6 months old. And it's been such a unique time right now. And I think it's, one thing that we've really been trying to hold fast to are the blessings through this, as Father Jay would say, Corona time.
That's right.
And the ability to be with my children day in and day out, where I would normally be in season, has just been incredible. Because, and I was talking about this with Father Jay before this started, but if this is a glimpse of what God has in store for me when my career is over, it's not a sad time. I'm being able to be in the backyard playing wiffle ball, playing soccer with my children is just something that, I don't take for granted, because I think it's just the opportunity right now to to learn and appreciate each of their unique abilities and just how unique they are in general, and just how much of a blessing they are, not only in my life but in each other's lives, is just incredible.
I saw a picture of you pitching batting practice to your kids, and the one hit a line drive right up the center field. So I'm like, this is going to be a good player.
We were actually just up at the farm last week, and we were able to all go out golfing together. And it's just things, like I said, things that during the season we don't have the ability to do, that, I think they're just, with homeschooling, like seeing the way their brains work and just seeing how smart and creative and just amazing human. Like, we just did the Aquinas walkathon on yesterday, and just seeing, I never would have guessed that my oldest daughter was able to run/walk 4 miles. Like, and just how generous they were through that, and just seeing their love, not only for their mother, but for each other. And when Eloise was born, Addie was, not even 2 years old yet. When Jack was born, they were both still young. So we had a nice gap between the three of them and Genevieve, and seeing the way that they love on their little sister is just, it's childlike wonder, right? That's what we're called to have. And just seeing the way that they appreciate her and just like love on her is just how so pure and beautiful. And it's just a glimpse of like how we should love each other. And I think that's just, I'm so blessed to have them in my life.
Yeah, I agree. One of the great things as a priest is obviously to be able to baptize and bless children. Here at Saints John and Paul, it's been something from the very beginning, the blessing of children, and to see and hear Christ say, "Come to me, those little children, because the kingdom of God is just for these." When you go to the baseball stadium and you have kids, how does baseball accommodate families like yours? Do you feel like your team is an extension of your family in some ways? What do you do with the kids? Your wife's at the game. Where are the kids? How does that work? Because when I go to a game, I'm just looking for the hot dog guy and the beer guy, and you get a hot dog and beer sitting down. But are there services? What do they do about families at baseball?
Yeah, they do a really good job of providing family rooms for the children, even for wives to have a place to go if they're feeling overwhelmed at games or whatever it may be. But teams do a really good job of caring for families, and they realize that obviously for us, like, if our families aren't taken care of, like, we can't perform at the level that we need to. And I think that we've been blessed to play for a lot of organizations that our children have found not only comfort, but just like a family within that team. And I think that's for our wives, having that support, and also like the community of the other wives and kids is really important as well. And like I said, they do a really good job. Yeah, a lot of times, right, you might see wives in the stands and wonder where the kids are. Usually they're underneath in a room just playing.
So baseball stadiums have like babysitting areas?
Yeah, for sure.
That's cool. What was it like to walk into a baseball stadium for the first time, knowing that you were going to pitch that day? Maybe it be a Yankee Stadium or whatever. Was it overwhelming? I don't know if it's the same, but when I walked into a church to celebrate Mass for the first time, I was, first of all, really nervous, wondering, am I going to make a mistake? And then all of a sudden, it's like dawned on me, but wait, this is what I was created for. I don't know. Did you have that feel, or what's it like to walk into a stadium knowing you're going to pitch and you're going to be a part of this huge moment?
Yeah, I think it's I'm growing up in St. Louis with the Cardinals. I went to Busch Stadium quite a bit growing up and had such an appreciation for the sport, and just like being at the ball game. You walk in through the gates, you're in a swarm of people. You smell the peanuts and hot dogs and popcorn and everything. Just like you can start to smell the grass. And then you walk through the tunnel and you see the field open up to you. And it's just like that big reveal that just it's beautiful. As a player, you're on a bus, you come up to the stadium, the bus pulls underneath the stadium, and you're like on the ground level. So you're just really on a service level. You don't really see that. A lot of times the service levels aren't the most like attractive looking. It's usually just cement blocks and whatnot. I remember we opened up in Tampa my rookie year, and like on opening day, and the bus pulled underneath. And Tampa does not have the most beautiful stadium. It's
indoor, right?
It's a dome. It's indoor. And we pulled down. I just remember like driving up to the stadium. You see it, and I'm just thinking like, this is where I get to go to work. Just thinking how awesome it was, like walking down through the tunnel, getting to the clubhouse the first time. But it was going out to batting practice that first time. It was sitting down on the bullpen in Tampa when the phone rings, not knowing if it's going to be your name, and like your heart starts to race. And then, you know, when that phone call finally came for me to start warming up on Easter Sunday, it's just, it's surreal, right? It doesn't seem, it's the same game I've always played, but it's just so different. And I remember running into the field after they made the pitching change, got to the mound, did my warm-up pitches, bent down to pick up the rosin bag, and when I stood up, there was someone standing there, and I looked up, and it was Derek Jeter staring me right in the face.
Wow.
And I just remember, I'll never forget his words. He just looked at me, he's like, "Hey, it's the same game we've been playing, just more people." And then he looked around, and Tampa didn't have a great crowd that night. He's like, "Actually, there's not that many more people." And so just like one of the greatest baseball players of all time went out of his way to like make me feel comfortable in that moment. It's just, it was surreal. It was just like one of the coolest moments from a baseball standpoint in my life, and just something that I'll never forget. And it's like you said, just when you as a child would walk into the stadium and see the field for the first time, like that was for me, like stepping back up to the mound and the umpire like giving me the play ball sign for the first time was, and obviously getting that first out was huge too. Just
so you got the first out on your first batter that you faced?
Yeah, I struck out the first guy I faced. And,
all right.
Yeah, it's one of those that, you know, it's still this day I have to pinch myself like that I get to play this amazing game for a living that, you know, I remember playing in the backyard with my brother growing up. And it's I definitely don't take it for granted, that's for sure.
So just quickly, so a pitcher has to throw a little ball into in a catcher's mitt. The strike zone is 17 inches wide, and then depending on where the midpoint of the batter is, it's roughly about 3.5 feet maybe from his midpoint of his basically like his back or shoulder down to his kneecap, and you have to throw a ball into that little rectangular window. And how far away are you? And did you ever feel like I can't do it anymore? It's like, how am I going to get the ball into that little space?
60 feet, 6 inches away.
Yeah.
And I think there are times on that mound that are incredibly lonely when you're not throwing it in the middle of that box. There are also times where you're throwing it in the middle of that box and it's going a very long way. But I have a real like fear every year going into spring training that like, is this going to be the year that I go out and try and throw and I just don't get anyone out? And it's really just, you know, I'll talk to Maria about it every year, and she's just, it's very simple. It's, you know, this is what you were called to do at this point in your life. And, you know, the preparation you've put in, the work that you've put in, the sacrifices you've made have made you able to do this. And it's, I've been fortunate that that's rang true every year so far. We'll see what happens this year.
Now, you don't just throw a ball into a rectangle. You throw 4 or 5 pitches. There's the 4-seam fastball that can get over 90-some miles an hour. There's a 2-seam fastball that's around the same speed. Then you throw a cutter and a changeup. But what's really fascinating to me is that you can throw a curveball with a vertical movement, in other words, an up and down movement of almost 55 inches and a horizontal movement of 18 inches. So you're not just throwing straight into a rectangle, you're getting this ball to come in at different angles. How do you figure out even how to begin to throw a ball like that? Like, what does it do? It's like spinning it, or how do you get a ball to even curve like that?
Grip plays a big part in it, how you hold the baseball, but then also what you do with your hand and your wrist when you release the baseball. I think it's muscle memory, and it's funny you say that because coming into this spring training, my curveball was something that I really wanted to work on, and we were trying to get it to be more vertical break and take out some of the horizontal break, and we've been so blessed with the technology that's come into baseball that we can actually measure that nowadays. They have different technologies, whether it's TrackMan or Rapsodo, that it's a box that sits in front of kind of between the mound and the plate, and it reads things like spin rate, velocity, release angle, spin direction. It's just there's so much more that goes into it nowadays than just standing on the mound and firing a baseball away, which I think there's a place for it. There's also a place for the old school where the guys would just get up and let it rip. But I think it's been one thing that's been incredibly helpful for me in this time right now is that I own one of those units, and just being able to know what those numbers are for me, and the curveball and the changeup and the fastball, and being able to stay sharp right now, whether it's, throwing light or, going to my driveway and throwing into a giant blue net and off the mound that Maria's grandfather helped me build years ago. It's
Now, what role does a catcher play in all this? Is he the one who really calls it? Is it the coach that calls or do you call the pitches? How do you decide what pitch to throw? And do you ever have a fight with your catcher? Like, no, I don't want to throw that pitch. I want to throw this pitch.
So when you're younger, like high school, college, a lot of times coaches will call pitches from the dugout to the catcher, and the catcher will relay it. As soon as you get into pro ball, you have a lot more ownership of what you're doing. It definitely is. I'd say it's more of a conversation, the entire game with the pitcher and catcher. Obviously, the longer you're with a certain catcher, the more they get to know you. I've been incredibly blessed in my career with the catchers that I've been able to throw to, who are just not only incredible with the way they receive the baseball, but also with game planning and getting to know me. I can definitely be stubborn and kind of bullheaded out there, and to my detriment at times. But I think that one of the best feelings is having a pitch in your mind and like the catcher squatting down, calling that pitch, knowing that you guys are on the same page. And a lot of work goes into getting to that point. And it's so much easier to have conviction in what you're going to do when you guys are on the same wavelength. But at the same time, there are times where your catcher will call something that's completely out of your comfort zone, where, him calling that and having the confidence that I can make that pitch, like really, lifts me up in that moment too. I think it's, not so much anymore. Do catchers really get overlooked? But I think that's just, they're so important, especially for a young pitcher. I was blessed early in my career with Russell Martin and Chris Stewart, my rookie year, just who really were able to walk me through my outings, like knowing what I did well, and then kind of like taking that and getting me from point A to point B. And then that throughout my career, like I said, I've had catchers that have been fantastic the entire time.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting dynamic that I only get to see from TV, but I don't know if the same thing would be a good correlate. It reminds me a little of marriage, that kind of back and forth. And the more you get comfortable with each other, the easier it is to be able to go through a game or life together,
No, like you said, you also have your spats at times too, where you disagree, and sometimes, yeah. it's always wanting to say whose fault it is, but it's I think it's a really good, the teams that typically, and pitchers that typically have like their catcher that they like throwing to, it's the relationship goes a lot further than just what's on the field. Like a lot of them are really good friends, and that's what helps build that relationship and that chemistry for sure.
Now, before we conclude this and we take questions, and I would encourage anybody who's any questions, first 3 questions we take, I've asked Dave if he'd be willing to sign a ball, and we'll fire a fastball at you through FedEx or something. We'll get you that. So any questions for Dave, please feel free to fire them in on the screen there below, and we will answer those in just a couple minutes. Dave, what you had remarked before that you felt like one of the teams that you really bonded with was the Miami Marlins, and obviously, you were on a team with one of the greatest pitchers of all time, and Jose Fernandez. And his story. I've worked in Mexico for a long time, so I love the Hispanic culture. I love the Cuban Mexican culture. And he fled Cuba on a speedboat, to escape to be able to play baseball, and then became one of the great dominant pitchers of all time. And unfortunately, the tragic boat crash ended his life. You were a teammate of his. What were those moments like? Like, what was it like hearing that news and then coming to the ballpark and not being able to hang out with him? Could you talk us through a little bit that moment with the Miami Marlins?
Yeah, we just one of if not the most lively, just loving individuals I've ever experienced in my life, and someone that from the first time I met him I didn't quite understand. Like he was he kind of rubbed me the wrong way when we first met, and it was almost like a little brother that just like annoyed you. And then as we got to know each other and like really realize that separate from baseball, like just the amazing person that he was and just how generous and loving and just an amazing friend. And then to top it off was the most gifted baseball player I've ever had the pleasure of seeing like firsthand. Just it could do anything on the baseball field, and as you mentioned, just with his ability as a pitcher, but he hit batting practice and he's hitting home runs every other swing. Just
wow.
As our pitching coach in 2015 would often say, his name is Chuck Hernandez, and he's had a really long-standing relationship with Jose just from their time in Tampa together when Jose was growing up. Just like God loves you, like that. That's just he'd do something crazy. Like we'd like, oh, you see the hole in that net right there? I'll bet you can't hit a ball through it. He'd set up on the tee, hit it straight through the hole, and it just like, oh, God loves you. Like that's just what he would say, and you just realize that like how he was able to just lift up not only a team but a city, and just really just on every fifth day when he'd come to pitch, it was can't like must watch is exactly what it was, because there was always something special was going to happen. And I remember driving to the field. Actually, we were driving in that Sunday. It was a day game. Maria was with us because they drove me in that day. They were going to come to the game. We were going to drive home together. So Maria and the kids were in the car, and she actually had gotten a text. I was driving, so I was looking at my phone. And it was from her wives group, and they were talking. It's just so life is so precious. I can't believe this. And so she didn't know what happened. So we had stopped. I pulled out my phone, and one of my teammates had said, "Guys, I can't talk about it, but like just look at MLB Trade Rumors. It's a website that follows all the news." And it was at that point that the first headline was, Jose Fernandez dies in a boating accident, and I was the second person into the clubhouse that morning, and I just remember walking past our security guards, and just the every breath was just like sucked out of the stadium. Like just walking in, and Tom Kohler was the teammate who was there before me, and just like falling into each other's arms. Like just, I remember sitting there on that Sunday, and we had a team meeting where they canceled the game. And we just had talked about him, and we ended up going over to his mom's house as a team, and just sat with her for a little bit. And we talked about, if we were going to play the following day, and they decided that we should, and we all wore number 16 Fernandez jerseys that night. And it was, the hardest 2 days not only as a baseball player, but just as a friend, as a teammate. And we got through warm-ups, the game starts, and D Gordon steps up to the plate, and D bats left-handed, but he went up to the plate with Jose's helmet, Jose's bat, and stood right-handed like Jose, took the first pitch just like Jose would, then got his stuff and flipped around left-handed. And D is, not a big guy, not a power hitter. He relies solely on speed and batting average and defense in his game. And 2 pitches later, he connects with the ball, and we're just watching this thing, and he hits a home run, the first batter of this game.
Wow.
And just as he's rounding the bases and just tears, we're all out in the bullpen, just incredibly emotional. And just he had a quote after the game that I'm probably going to misquote it, but it was along the lines of, if you've watched this and don't believe in God, what more do you need? Something along those lines. And it was through that tragedy that there were so many. And I remember, going to the funeral, and, so many of my teammates just had questions, started, having questions about faith, and just how those of us who were able to help lift people up in that time, and just you took a group of 25 to 40 players at that time, and yeah, we were a family before, but there's a bond there now that won't ever be broken. It's just not because of the tragedy itself, but because of the person and the effect he had on our lives while he was living.
What does that say in your mind about the importance of what you called one of the big turning points of your life, of a real relationship with Christ, having a family structure to be able to face challenges like losing one of your best teammates? How's that affected you? That D. Gordon quote, do you see that being something that is central to how you overcome injuries or tragedies in your own life, keeping that focus on heaven and Jesus?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just real quickly before we run out of time so that people can ask questions, just talk about, this is not, it pales in comparison to what I was just talking about. But in 2018, in spring training, I blew out my elbow, and needed Tommy John surgery. I got this really cool scar here. But I remember being so angry afterwards, and just angry at God. And I remember going in, I blew out on St. Patrick's Day of 2018, had surgery on March 26th, I believe it was. And going, Easter was the following Sunday, and going into Mass and just looking at the cross and just having these angry thoughts and just these just awful things going through my mind for the first time in my entire life. I've never experienced anything like it. I remember reaching out and talking to Father Jay about it, and it lasted for a little while. And then we went up to Seattle to be with the team, and Maria and I went out on a date, and we were sitting there in the driveway afterwards, and she just asked me, I just was in a bad mood, and she's like, why are you so angry? And we had talked about it before, but it was just in that moment that, I was just kind of poured it out. As if I'm not called to do this, I've dealt with a litany of injuries throughout my career. And it just seems like every time I'm getting to a point of taking the next step, I'm knocked back down by an injury. And I just remember just sitting there, and she just looked at me and she said, you always say that baseball's not your number one. It can't be your number one. Maybe this is God giving you a chance to prove it. And I just remember that just completely reshaped everything that I had going on in my life at that point. And just that impact, and realizing that how in that moment insignificant throwing a baseball was and what God's overall plan of my life is. And I think it's moments like what happened with Jose, where we realize that we need God in our life to deal with the tragedies and to have hope, and that we can, like the verse you talked about in the beginning, that we can persevere. And I think, just to wrap it up, for the longest time, the question that I was always asking was why. Like, why did this happen? Why did this happen? And I think, one thing that I often talk about because of it is, we often focus on the why, but we're asking the wrong question. The question that we should really be focusing on, we think about Mary when she received the news that she was going to give birth to Christ, and she didn't say, well, why me? Her question was how. And I think when we focus on why, we're limiting what God's ability in our life. We're, like what I often say is, we're putting God in a man-sized box, and we're not letting him do what he's able to do in our life. Whereas when we ask what and how, and that's one of the big things that I took from Maria's, comment to me, is I was asking why, but I needed to be asking, what am I called to do in this time? And that's one thing that I've really been focusing on right now is, if I'm not called to play baseball in these months, what and how can I, glorify God in these moments? And I think when Father Jay first asked me to be on this, I was a little bit timid, because even though I've just spent an hour talking about myself, I'm not always comfortable doing it. But I think this is like what and how I'm called in these moments, to hopefully share some good news. And if it impacts one person's life through this, I think it's well worth it. And
well, I'm sure it will impact lives, and there's no doubt that in the United States we tend to identify people with what they do, and that's okay. You're a baseball player, but your real identity in God's eyes is that you're his son. You're a part of his family, and our family becomes a great way for us to discover how God works through us. And the examples you gave, from your parents to your wife to even your teammates, show how God wants to surround us with this great cloud of witnesses, as we hear in Hebrews 12:1, which was the opening scripture, to throw off everything that hinders us from being able to persevere and run the race. Speaking of that, let's fire it out to questions, see if we get any fastballs coming in from our viewership here. Okay, Jen asks the question, can you attend Mass when you're on the road?
One of my favorite things to do on the road is, actually, we're blessed with an organization called Catholic Athletes for Christ, and they provide masses at the stadiums. So a lot of times there will be, wherever we are, they have priests sometimes rotate that on either Saturdays or Sundays. We can have, it's definitely a quicker mass than what we're accustomed to. But so we have that. But then there are also times where we, have a unique opportunity. When we go stay in New York, we stay right across the street from St. Patrick's, and have the ability to go see some really cool churches. We do play a lot of Saturday and Sunday day games, but that lends the ability to be able to go to a Saturday night vigil mass. So one of the coolest experiences I've ever had was at Wrigley Field when I was playing for the Marlins. They did a mass in the bleachers looking out the stadium, and at the consecration, when the priest lifted up the host, the sun was just like pouring down over the field. And it was one of those moments where it's like, I really wish I could take a picture of this right now. Because it's just something that like would be amazing, like frame just the beauty of, two incredibly important parts of my life coming together.
Well, if you ever need a priest for any of those masses, I'd be willing to be your personal chaplain. Okay, let's see. Do we have any other questions out there? All right. Are you Are you relieved when you get a pinch hitter and don't have to bat? What is your batting average? Before he answers that, I can say that I watched him play at PNC Park, and he got a single into right field. And so I got to see you do that. So you actually did get one hit at least. I don't know what your official batting average is, though.
I'm trying to pull it up real quick. So it depends when the pinch hitter is happening. If I get pinch hit for early in the game when I'm starting, I'm usually not too happy because it means I didn't pitch very well. And I mean, it's terrifying hitting, if I'm being honest. That baseball hurts really bad if it hits you. My batting average is 115.
All right.
I take incredible pride in the fact that it's over 100. It took a lot of work on the back end of my National League career to get it to that.
Is bunting hard?
Yes, it shouldn't be, but if you think about it, like from the time we're in high school until you get to the major leagues, you don't swing a bat ever. So you don't see live pitching ever. So bunting it depends if it's hard. If the guy's throwing really hard, it's difficult. If it's moving a lot, it can be difficult. But the one thing that we do practice is bunting. So
that would be the scariest thing in baseball, is to have to square up for a bunt. I really don't know how you could do that. Anyway, do we have any more questions out there? All right. How does your Catholic faith play a role during a game? For example, do you pray prior to each inning? Do you pray prior to facing a difficult hitter or throwing a crucial pitch? Or do you just let go and let God handle it during the 9 innings?
I have tried my best to, I don't want to say not burden God during the 9 innings of a baseball game, but one of the things that I got into doing early in my career, back when I was a starter, was on the day that I pitched, I would, find a quiet place in the clubhouse or the weight room or the training room, wherever it may be, and I would sit down and pray a rosary, just to kind of help focus me, and also just the calming presence just the calm that washes over me in that moment is just incredible. So, I mean, if you can imagine the 5 days leading up to my start, I'm pretty anxious, and the day of, it's kind of spiked. And just taking that time to really just like invite Mary and Christ into my life and just let them like kind of take hold of me was always something that really helped just calm me down before I was really starting to like try and get prepared and get in the moment.
Any last second questions before we head on out here? Well, oh, good. My 12-year-old son, Lucas, is interested in knowing one thing that you did as a teenager that helped you to get where you are today.
I played multiple sports. I think it's so often we focus on being a pitcher instead of just being an athlete. And I think that's, as we're growing, learning our bodies by playing multiple sports is the most beneficial thing that we can do, just from a movement pattern standpoint, but also just work. You have to, the work you put in when you're younger teaches you like how to appreciate more than just what you do in a game. The process itself is more beneficial than the product. I think that's, one thing that I can definitely say that helped.
Now, I do want to extend just a little bit on one last question, which is this Corona time baseball startup possibility. It seems like one of the sticking points is testing and whether it'll be safe. There's also the sticking point of whether the players and the owners can come together and do contract negotiations and come through. Where do you see the biggest challenge for baseball restarting? And do you honestly think you're going to have a baseball season this year?
I would say the biggest challenge is just that the virus itself is still unpredictable, in a sense that we're still a little ways out from when we would potentially start up. So all it would really take is something bad to happen to kind of derail it. And that's from a lot of different industries, not just baseball. I think we are moving in the direction of a season happening. I think there are still many hurdles, whether it's testing, whether it's finding the facilities to play in. I think it's just such a unique time, and I think it's, I wish I had a direct answer for you. I don't really even at this point feel comfortable speculating what's going to happen. I think it's the parties that need to get together to have the conversations and the deliberations about what needs to happen for the season to happen those are happening. So there seems to be some momentum towards what a season would look like happening currently, which gives us optimism, which I've said before. I think there's more optimism than there was a month ago. But health and safety is the biggest issue, as it should be. And I think that's the one thing that needs to get ironed out before anything.
Well, Dave, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming on the show. It's a lot of fun to be able to explore life and Catholicism from a pitcher's perspective. Just a little program note for next week. I'm looking forward to sitting down with our 3 deacons from our great grouping, and we're going to have a conversation on diaconate, what that means to be a permanent deacon. 2 of our deacons are married, 1 is single, and then the way they serve our church, the influence that the diaconate service has had on their own life in our church. So come and join us next Tuesday, which is May 26th at 2 p.m., where we'll be exploring Catholicism from the eyes and perspective of our 3 deacons in our great grouping, and can't wait to be able to join them. Dave, once again, thank you so much for joining us. I can't wait to cheer you on. I don't know if I'll actually be allowed into the stands, but maybe if you invite me to celebrate the Mass, I could sneak in and be socially distanced in a way to actually watch you. Any final thoughts before we close out, Dave?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you and thank the people who are watching. Just the amazing priest who married Maria and I gave us some really good advice when we were walking around Princeton for our marriage prep, and that was to always continue to tell our story. And I think, I thank you for giving me the opportunity to do that. For those of you that don't know, Father Jay married us, and just always dropping pearls of wisdom that just, stick with us. But yeah, like I said, thank you for giving me this opportunity to not only share my story, but share some good news and God's love.
It's great. It's great to be on your team. And let's just finish in prayer. In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen. We give all the glory to God. Glory be to the Father, to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.